Hi, I'm here to tell you about how to do the acid-base titration portfolio lab for IPS. This is a portfolio task, and it's an important lab in the freshman Introduction to Physical Science class. Some of the goals of this lab are for you to learn basic lab procedure, understand how to work with some of the lab equipment. You're going to practice data collection. Data is a set of numbers, measurements that you've collected, and how to interpret those results. So the objective of this lab is to find out which antacid tablet is the strongest. And you're going to be looking at which tablet is neutralized by hydrochloric acid. There are three terms in this lab that are important, and you're going to need to make sure that when you write up your lab report that you include those terms. Those terms are titration, I'll come to that in a minute, neutralization, and an indicator. So you know from your work already with the pH scale that one end of the pH scale, the lower end, is acidic. The other end is basic. The middle is neutral. That's where water is. Just one level above water is where an antacid tablet, when it's dissolved in water, lies. And hydrochloric acid is fairly strong and more down towards this end. So, let me explain some of the equipment. I'll go in order. The first piece of equipment, and you'll need to include this list on your lab write-up, it should be a vertical list, is going to be a ring stand. It's called a ring stand because it also holds a ring. We're not using a ring today, but we're going to use something called a burette clamp. A burette clamp clamps a type of special cylinder called a burette. This burette is marked in millimeters, starts at 1 and it goes down to 50. We're going to be pouring some hydrochloric acid into this burette clamp. Down here, there's this cool little fixture which you turn and you're able to drop hydrochloric acid or whatever liquid is in the clamp drop by drop. Now, when you change something, the chemical property of something, drop by drop like that, and you change its character, its basic chemical character, in this case going from a base to an acid, that process is called titration. Okay, so more on the equipment. You need, besides the burette, going in order, you need a mortar and a pestle. This will be what you use to grind up your antacid tablet. You'll grind it up as well as possible. You will also need 60 mils of hydrochloric acid. This is a strong acid, so use gloves when you're pouring it. You're going to be pouring it into a beaker. This is a beaker, and it's marked in little gradations also. You want approximately 60 mils, a little less, 50, 60. And you are also going to want a funnel. The funnel will be what you pour your approximately 50 mils of hydrochloric acid in to this clamp with. You also will need a wash bottle with distilled water, which is right here. You'll need an Erlenmeyer flask. This is the fancy name for this type of flask.
I left out the R. My bad.
Whoops. Oh, it's R instead of H.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's both.
And you will need some methyl orange and a dropper. The dropper it's just an eyedropper. The methyl orange is the name of this indicator. Now, in this case, this is an indicator. This tells you when a substance has gone from base to acidic. This tells you when something is acidic. It does not tell you when something's neutralized. It tells you when something is acidic.
By turning pink.
It does that by turning pink, a bright pink. You're also going to need a stirring rod, and you'll need some paper towels just to set the stirring rod down on. And that's your equipment.
Hi, welcome to this demonstration of the acid-base titration lab for IPS. This is the lab you're going to be looking at when you do this. Step 1 is set up the titration apparatus. This is it. Step 2, obtain an antacid tablet and record its name. I'm going to grab one of the three options. It's called Tums. And I'm going to write its name right below here, antacid, Tums. Step 2 includes crush the tablet with the mortar and pestle. So I would add that Tums tablet to this mortar and crush it with this pestle. And take your time. This should take 2 or 3 minutes at least to get it crushed down to a fine powder.
How come you're only using one tablet? The dosage says 2.
Good question. We're going to use half a dose because then we don't waste so much of the school's money on supplies. This dose is recommended to be 2 to 4 tablets. So we're going to take the lower of those two numbers, 2, and we're cutting it in half. 1 tablet of Tums, 1 tablet of this generic Equate antacid. And if you're going to test, the third thing you're going to test is this powder. Oh, it's a liquid. And for that you're only going to use half a teaspoon, because that would be half of the lowest dose they recommend.
Thank you.
So I've taken my Tums, I've crushed it in the mortar and pestle. Step 4 is rinse the mortar and pestle 3 times with distilled water.
Wait, before you do that, did you add the powder to your Erlenmeyer flask?
I forgot to tell you about that. Thank you. Get my Erlenmeyer flask out, preferably on a piece of paper towel to catch what misses. Then I'm going to take the powder and carefully dump it into the Erlenmeyer flask.
Is there a little lip on that?
There is. There's a little lip right there which will make pouring a little bit easier. And this is after you've, first you dump in the powder, then you are going to rinse down the mortar and pestle to get any remaining grains of Tums off of there.
You do that 3 times?
We do that 3 times. Rinse, pour. Rinse, pour. One more. Rinse and pour. Hopefully that will get everything off of your mortar and pestle.
And what level should the water be at in that Erlenmeyer flask?
It should be at 50. There's the 50 at the bottom. If 3 rinses did not fill it to 50, you want to put it on a flat surface and carefully add more distilled water until it reaches 50.
If you go over or under a little bit, it's not so a big deal.
It's not that big a deal. You want to be as close to 50 as possible, though.
Okay. What do you do next?
Next, we're going to put the flask underneath this burette.
Have you put in the drop?
No, I haven't. Thank you. Step 5 is add 3 drops of methyl orange. You unscrew the dropper, and this is poison, so don't get it on anything. Put 3 drops right in your flask along with the water and the crushed Tums. Then you're going to stir it with the stirring rod until it's pretty dissolved. Stir it for 2 or 3 minutes. Then you're going to put it under your burette clamp. And the next step is to add the hydrochloric acid to the burette. We have a beaker.
Right beside.
Thank you. a beaker for measuring 50 mils of hydrochloric acid. So we definitely wear gloves and wear goggles for this part. You don't want hydrochloric acid in your eyes. Unscrew the hydrochloric acid, pour in 50 mils. That's the line between the 40 and the 60. Then when you've got your hydrochloric acid in your beaker, pour it into this funnel carefully. Don't get it on your skin. That would hurt too. And it should be just about to this top gray line. This is 50 mils from here to here. Mils is short for milliliters. Okay, next step. Record where you are here. Write that down. Initial volume of acid in burette. 50, right there, if you got it right on the money. If you didn't, that's okay. Just write down, maybe you got 49.5. Okay, record initial. Next, this is critical. You might want to come in close here. We're going to turn this knob very slowly until one drop at a time starts to come into the flask. And we're going to swirl as this hydrochloric acid gets dumped into this base and indicator. And eventually there's going to be some pink color showing up in your base and indicator. When that pink starts to stay for 30 seconds, you stop. You swirl it. You see you've got at least 30 seconds of pink, and you turn this so you don't get any more hydrochloric acid. That's when you write down volume of acid when color lasts. This volume can be figured by looking at this burette clamp again. It's going to be something below where you started because you've used some of this acid to neutralize this base. Maybe it's 45, maybe it's 42, somewhere in here. Just find the number.
Okay, so that drop when it lasts for 30 seconds, what does that tell you?
That tells you you've gone beyond neutral and you're into acid territory. This is the acid end of the spectrum, and this is the base end of the spectrum. Tums is on the base end of the spectrum, and hydrochloric acid is on the acid end of the spectrum. And our indicator tells us when we've added enough hydrochloric acid to cross over the midline, neutral, into acid territory.
Okay.
Okay, the last step is going to be subtract the volume that you started with. This is confusing because this says 0, but what it's really measuring is 50. If it says 0 and you filled it up to here, that means you've got 50 milliliters. So say you started here and you ended where it says 7, you're going to you've used 7 milliliters of acid.
And you're going to do this 2 more times, so each time the numbers are going to be different. You'll do it again with equate, and then you'll do it again with the liquid equate.
Right. We're going to do this 2 more times, and we're going to use the same hydrochloric acid. But it's very important to record before and after you titrate or slowly add to your sample.
So when you write up your lab, you need to make sure that you follow this format on the lab, and you're going to have your name and partner's name, the title of the lab, the acid-base titration lab, the objective, which is to determine which tablet is most effective at neutralizing, a vertical list of the equipment, and in this lab it also asks for a labeled diagram. We've seen them where people have done that labeled diagram as a sketch or as a photograph, however you want, but you need a labeled diagram. The procedure, and this is important, in the procedure you should give definitions for neutralization, indicator, and titration. Neutralization is that moment when the acid and the base are neutralized in this lab. An indicator is, in this case, it's a nice simple indicator. It just tells you when something has become acidic. And titration is that process of changing the chemical property of something drop by drop. You're also going to need, to include your results, that would be the data that you had over here in a table format. And you need to also include class averages. Your teacher will tell you about that, where you're collecting what other students have gotten for their results. And your conclusion. Also important in every lab is possible sources of error. You need to list 3 possible sources of error. Where might you have gone wrong? Maybe you didn't grind your tablets into a fine enough powder. Maybe you didn't record your hydrochloric acid amount right. Anyway, you'll hear some other sources of error.
Message in the office for Christoph Naggert and Abby Jewett.